When it comes to sales, there's a lot we can borrow from the world of sports. And on this particular episode, we're going to talk to you about how you can be deliberate, especially plan, so you can be more effective and successful in your sales game. You're going to love this one. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist podcast. I'm your host, Donald C. Kelly, the Sales Evangelist. And I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And on this episode, we have a phenomenal guest. And I want to make sure y'all prepare for this. Paul Owen and I are going to talk about how you can, we're going to marry sports and sales, and specifically about how you can be deliberate with your craft. As a sales professional, this is something that you need to make sure you're doing. And going into 2023, especially with the tightening of the economy, we know things ain't getting easier. We need to make sure that we're prepared and that we have the processes and the tools to help us to be as successful as possible. Now, Paul is going to give an introduction to himself. You're going to learn about some of his amazing things that he's doing with his organization and how he consults and works with companies and sales reps and individuals like you and me to improve our craft and our game. He's going to lay out a framework, one that I find very fascinating, easy to follow, and you can take and apply too. Now, if this is your first time listening to our podcast or watching one of our videos, subscribe. Go ahead and subscribe. Yes, please subscribe. Now, take the link from this episode and share it with one other person you find that could benefit from it. Whether it's a team member, your boss, your cousin, somebody who could benefit from this episode, share it with them. And then the third thing is connect with Paul and myself on LinkedIn. You can find me, Donald C. Kelly. Now, as we dive into this episode, you get a chance to learn about Paul. You're going to hear this framework, but you're going to see how planning and being structured is not going to restrict you, but how it's going to liberate you and guide you down the next path of success. Let's go ahead and dive into the episode and get a chance to learn about Paul. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Donald. Delighted to be here.
Oh, I'm super pumped to have you and looking forward to gaining some good insights from you today, especially on this topic. I'm a big believer in planning. I'm a big believer in how in sports in general. And even though I'm not the greatest at my craft of sports, but I still like it. I'm okay with soccer, and I do pretty decent with flag football. But the principles still apply.
Okay. Exactly. I'm not coming to this as a former or even existing great sports person. Just the lessons from sport.
Well, fair enough then. We're both on the same path. We'll relish in the glory days. But Paul, I bragged about you a little bit there in a teaser. Why don't you take a minute and tell us a little bit more about you and what you do, man?
Well, I founded my company, Sales Talent, in 2011. We're based in London, and we work with clients to help them sell better, whether that's through the training that we do or the consultancy packages that we do. And I've been training tech companies a few years ago when I first got into this world, Donald, and then decided I wanted to do my own thing. And I felt there were two elements that I wanted to inform our work, inform everything that I do. The first one is that sales is misunderstood. And it was part of the reason why I came to sales so late. I didn't join it till I was 32 and broke. And it was because I misunderstood sales, and I turned away from it through ignorance. And I think a lot of selling is actually the starting point is a misunderstanding of sales. So that number one. And then number two, I think the secret sauce to success in life, if indeed there is one, is confidence. I think no matter what we do in life, we're much better at doing it if we're confident. I think often what happens in sales and in life as well is that we don't build confidence in people in the right way. And so the confidence, I think, some of the stuff we're going to talk about today comes from being competent. We shouldn't be confident until we're competent. But the other part of it is to elevate sales, to celebrate salespeople. So I've always been very keen that when people work with me, they leave the room as a salesperson feeling that little bit better about themselves.
Well, I like that already. And I think you're 100% right there. Definitely some misunderstanding that goes on with sales, and going back to, to what you're sharing here with, in regards to the way that we are, the way that salespeople are depicted and the way that it's seen. So I'm really looking forward to hearing some of your thoughts on this topic, tying towards that as well, because what we're going to talk about today is sales lessons from sports. Planning is liberating, not restrictive. And for many of us as sales professionals, we go by the seat of our pants. And I'm speaking from experience. I as an individual contributor, I did it where I came into the office and just went according to what was on my calendar and just hummed and didn't have a process with it because I didn't want to be restrictive. So I want to hear from your thoughts on this. First off, why make the correlation with sports? And then we can go into why you feel this particular way.
Okay, I think the correlation with sport is it's one of the avenues in life, and there are a few others, but it's perhaps the most widespread, where people have a cultural understanding of success in sport. We celebrate sports people. They are media figures to us. They're interviewed. We read books about them, even if we're not enormous sports fans. And there's also something, so many correlations between the world of sports and the world of sales, and probably other worlds too, Donald, in that there are so many things you can do in sport where you do everything right, but you still lose. And other times when you don't do everything right and you still win. And I think sport is like a popular culture depiction, probably of life, but certainly of sales. And that angle of, something happened the other day, and I heard somebody talking about a football match, and somebody, a team had lost, and the coach was talking about it, saying, listen, we got our game right. We went out there and we performed the way we expected to perform. On the day, we just beat someone that was better on the day. And we're going to go off and try and work on that. And I think there's so much around, we're going to talk about in the next few minutes or so of links in it. So it's around planning and structure that you mentioned at the beginning. There's around practice. I think there's lots we learn from sport around practice. And I think there's also lots lots of links from sport around data, and actually how often data is unreliable. So the key is to choose the right data and analyze it correctly.
So why don't we just go dive straight into it then? Planning, the idea of restrictiveness versus liberating, and how planning is liberating. Would you be willing to share it? Because you go into a lot of these companies, and also you work with individuals. What are some of the things you hear from sellers when they say that it's restrictive, like planning can be restrictive?
There's a couple of elements that of reference points, Donald, I tend to use when working with sales teams around this idea of plan and around this idea of structure. And the first one is recognizing that in most areas of sales, there are ingredients to being successful. Okay, you touched on earlier how you yourself as a salesperson, you're winging it sometimes, making up as you go along. And what can often happen is people can succeed doing that. I'm sure you probably succeeded doing that. But there's a couple of questions I would have about it. Will be, was that the best you could have been? And I suspect the answer would be no.
No way.
You were good enough, right? You were good enough, but it wasn't the best version of you. And secondly, could you build a successful team of people like that? And that's very difficult to do, first of all. So there are people that do well in spite of themselves, not because of themselves, in lots of ways. And so within ingredients of success, I think you have the sales artists, the people that are just good at it and don't really know why they're good at it. And for people like that, by the way, I probably leave them to it. I think to impose structure on those people who are unconsciously good. So entrepreneurs are often unconsciously good sellers. They're just good. They just get it.
Why do you think that's the case? Why do you feel that?
I think it's to do with I almost go back to my favorite definition of sales. It's not one of my own quotations, but my favorite definition is that sales is the transfer of enthusiasm.
Gotcha.
So when you are passionate about something, your clarity around something, you're just sharing it with other people. Whenever we talk about things that we love, we come alive, and our voice changes and our body language changes. And I think not in all cases, clearly, we're talking about an enormous cohort of people being entrepreneurs, but very often because they've come up with the idea. They've come up with an idea because they saw a problem in the marketplace or a gap in the market they could fill. And so through their ability to define that problem and present a solution, they can often be successful at selling in spite of the fact that they don't technically sell very well. I'll give you an example. My wife and I used to share an office, Donald. And she did the sales side of her company, and then she had a operational team that would deliver. And she asked me to give her some sales training one day, and I said, that's a terrible idea for all the reasons that are making you smile now, right? So there's the interaction idea would make it terrible. But there's a bigger reason why. And the bigger reason why was she was really good at it.
Yeah.
She was really successful at selling. You know, her conversion rate was remarkable. And so my first point around training is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if you're selling well, keep doing it. The second point, which links back to the entrepreneur piece that I mentioned earlier, is that she was successful in an idiosyncratic way. You know, it was just a weird way to sell. You would never train somebody to sell that way. And so by trying to give her structure and trying to give her process, I almost definitely would have made her worse, because she unconsciously sold well and it worked. And so we didn't do the sales training for all those reasons. So yeah, I think entrepreneurs just sometimes, because of their belief in their passion. The problem comes, and some of the work that I do with companies, is that if that entrepreneur then wants to build a sales team, then you have a problem. In that, what will typically happen, as you'll probably know, they'll say, oh, I need to find a young version of me, or 2 or 3 young versions of me, and bring them in, get them to shadow me, follow me around, and then let them loose. It won't work.
It never worked. I've never seen it work.
No. And so that then becomes the problem. So for an entrepreneur, they can be good themselves, but then I think they either need to learn themselves a process or get people in who can create a structured process that then allows them to hire people, identify the skills that they need, and to train them.
Okay. So with that, and I agree with you all there, I call it that it's kind of, and I think you embodied it and defined it a little bit better than I typically do it. But it's just this idea that you have this, I don't know, like the entrepreneur magic, where the founder magic, really, because it is your baby. Like I feel that I'm the best salesperson in our company. Because it's my thing. I started it and it grew. I was the first one to help those clients and to see the change in their faces, and got excited about the coaching and the programs that we have to offer. So, you know, that makes it a little bit more unique, but you're 100% right. But, you know, transferring that to a structural environment where a salesperson may feel like, you know, I'm not liberated enough. I want to be an entrepreneur, or I want to have the opportunities. And I think you mentioned it as well when it said that, you know, going back to, you know, early DK years where I had success in spite of my planning. Therefore, I correlated that I didn't need to do planning. Right. How do you help someone to recognize, go back to the sports idea, to start structuring the day? If I come to you and I you know, I could have been, I did okay. Maybe I hit my quota every once in a while, and I was a mediocre at best, maybe 85% of my performance. What could you do to help me to start structuring my day if I come to you in that sense? That's probably a loaded question.
No, it's fine. I'll go back to the point I didn't quite come back to earlier.
Yeah, my bad.
My apologies. Is on ingredients of success. So there are certain things that are more likely to make you successful. Okay, and I use a profile, a cash profile, which is common across many different coaching arenas. And it's KASH, not CASH. And these are the ingredients of success, probably in most jobs, but in sales, and they stand for knowledge. So the K is for knowledge, the A for attitude, the S for skills, and the H for habits. And what I typically do with any sales team is start with, let's put together these ingredients of success. And in most sales teams, and certainly somebody like yourself, you would know these. You'd know them, okay? There'd be knowledge about the market, about the sector, about competition, about your products, your services, your CRM. There's a long list of knowledge. When you first start in a job, you need that knowledge. Attitude, I'd like to think, is what you're hired for. In most cases, although it needs a framework to sustain it. Skills is where I get involved in more detailed fashion, like giving you the skills, the structure to have consistently successful sales conversations with people who have a need that you can satisfy. And there are a range of skills, as you all know, in being a successful salesperson. And then finally, the H is habits. Which ends up being the most important bit, right? You can have all the knowledge, the attitude, and the skills. If you don't do it day to day, then you're not going to be successful. And where I find it helps sales teams and salespeople is being able to look at that straight away. You can start identifying the areas in which you feel strong I mean, we're never 10 out of 10 at every bit, right? But there's, areas where you might be strong and then areas where you might be weak. So my first starting point, back to your question this time around, will be to identify with people which area or which areas they think they could be 5%, 10%, 15% better. If they then sit there and go, listen, I've looked at that, Paul, thanks for your time, but I am 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 on all of those. I simply can't get better. Then the training program or the service is probably not going to go very far, right? Because nobody in any field of human endeavor can make other people want to learn if they don't want to learn. So there's got to be that recognition, but then it's a case of identifying the areas where they have most to gain through learning. So that's where I start with. And the second point I go to, and this is not universally agreed, I would say, in the sales world, Donald, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on it, is that I think that the vast majority of sales interactions, of sales conversations with clients broadly follow the same structure. And again, if I work with sales teams and they say to me, oh, Paul, come on, every single client's different. They're unique, right? Every person's different. Yes, I agree with that. Then they'll say, well, then every sales conversation is completely unique. How can you prepare for something that's completely unique? And the mistake on that is not recognizing that actually, if you're talking about similar products and services, you are going to be asking similar questions again and again. You're going to be talking about particular selling points or benefits or features of what you offer again and again. And so actually, when you break it down, I suggest that most sales interactions follow a 4-step process. And so that's trying to get people again to look at it step by step and to assess, where are you strong? Are you strong at the beginning? Are you strong at the questioning? Because I think very often what happens, and I'll finish on this point and let you jump in with either disagreement or points, Donald, is that people just look at a conversation and they go, oh, that went well. And it's an overall feeling. And they're normally basing that, back to my first point, on whether that was a successful call or not. And by breaking a call down section by section with my coaching clients, I'll give them feedback on each section of the call. It's a much more deliberate, conscious process that means it's more likely that you'll be successful more consistently.
Well, I'm not I want to have anything too controversial from me on that part. I'm in alliance with you, in agreement with you. I feel very strongly. Yeah, you do. You're going to have the similar framework. The situations, the individuals, the stories may differ, but you're going to still have that same framework. So I agree with that. And I love the idea of breaking it down, because that's the mistake that I made before, Paul, when I first started doing this thing, was I saw some folks that were selling in a company that I came in. They didn't have any formal training, by the way, at all. In one of the second organizations I came into, let me do correction on that. And in this organization, the way that it was like, just go out and just do it, right? So in my mind, I saw a couple guys that were one dude who did stuff well, but the thing is, I didn't know his process. So it was hard for me to evaluate what he was doing, the structure. So like you're saying, and then also it was then really difficult for me to be able to evaluate what worked when I got an appointment or when I got a deal, because I didn't follow the structure. But when you can fine tune, and go back to sports, when you can fine tune, like, where you're having the most difficulties, you can then improve or enhance your capability. Like I love using the track example, because my fellow Jamaican, Usain Bolt, if he had, one point he had a hard time getting out the blocks well, but over time he improved on getting out the blocks. And you saw how, it continues to improve on his career. But being able to break it down like that, I love that structure. So I'm in agreement.
Yeah. And people are different. People have, people are more skilled at certain areas than they are at others in a conversation. So just quickly to run through the structure. And I don't suggest for 1 second, Donald, that I invented the structure. I think I've just named it. And I named it after doing, I don't know, thousands and thousands of calls and meetings, and then working with probably tens of thousands of individual interactions with people. Well, let's not do it in order to begin with, but
sure.
Obviously one of the steps in your sales conversations, you got to sell something, right? You can be as consultative as you like. We make our living from selling, but I think the selling doesn't come until the third step of a sales conversation. This idea, maybe coming from the 1970s, maybe the 80s, Donald, of sell, 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 pitch, pitch, pitch. Most of us dislike it. But selling, so therefore, is the third and the penultimate step. If we move back from selling, what are we trying to do before we sell? Well, we're trying to get understanding of the client, right? We're trying to get understanding, is this thing that we have, this product, this service, going to suit them? And so we have to find out about them. And I think sales at its heart is helping people make good buying decisions. And so if we're going to sell to them, we need to understand them. How do we understand them? We ask questions. Okay, so step 2 is to ask questions. But I don't think conversations start there, whether over the phone or with face-to-face. We don't start with questions. And I think when you dive straight into questions, you always hit the same barrier, right? And you'd have had it as well. I'm sure people jump in with questions, and at some stage you say, hang on, Donald, let me just stop you there. What's the point of this phone call for me? What's the point of this interaction for me? And so the first start of any sales conversation really is that we earn the right to speak. If you consider, just keeping it within telephone sales, telesales for now, when people answer the phone, they're free to speak. That's how phones work. If somebody calls me now, I don't answer the phone, right? I'm not free. But if you answer, you're free. So now you're choosing who you're going to speak to. And so I've got whatever it might be, 10, 12, 15, 18 seconds to earn the right to your company for the next few minutes. So earning the right is first. Then if we do that well, we ask questions. If there's a client need we've identified, then we move on to step 3 to say, hey, Donald, now I know a bit more about what you're facing. I think we can help. Here's how. And we go into our sales phase. And then the fourth and final step is that in any buying process, there are a series of stages to that buying process. And so the last one, we want to agree the next step in that process. And so it's yes or no to the next step. We wrap up the conversation, we make a suggestion or recommendation about the next step, and we're looking to get yes or no to the next step. So earn the right to speak, ask questions, sell to match need, yes or no to a next step. And that's the structure that I work with. And back to your point then, on coaching clients, I can sit with them and say, listen, you earn the right really well. You skip through your questions too quickly. You asked like 2 questions, 3 questions, and you haven't really identified a need with the client. Actually, you know what? Your pitch was great. Your pitch, you put across the company beautifully. The trouble was the client wasn't listening to you. You're only 47. You're only 47 seconds in, right?
Yeah.
They're down to 2 basic questions, and you dive straight in. And this is, I think, one of the most common errors I see in sales is that people are rehoning their pitch and refashioning their stories. And now those things I like and I agree with. But if you haven't established that connection to a client through the questioning phase, it's largely wasted.
Yes, I agree. What I like about this as well, it's super easy for anyone to take away and take and use and apply like right away. But more in particular, like I feel like, it's almost like a graduation from one step to the next when you set it up in this structure, in this manner, because it naturally is going to allow you to be able to, you can't really go to the questions if you don't really you've gotten a right to talk, and that's where your pitch, your value, what's the value prop? Why should I even talk to you in the first place? First arrive.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. And that clarity, I think, is helpful. I'd like to think I don't overestimate my own mental ability to do lots of things at the same time. And just doing one thing at the same time, when they pick up the phone, I've got one job, and that's to earn the right to speak to them today. Once I've done that, I then go into my questioning phase. And I think the more we clutter our minds and jump too far ahead in things, the more we get lost. And linking it back to sport, when you see sports teams that work well, and this is particularly with sports teams, but I think probably it translates to individuals as well, Donald, is that everyone knows their job.
Yeah.
And in a team, you have a job. And sometimes, same with football in our world, soccer in your world, you get some people that their job is to win the ball back and then give it to somebody who can play. And so better playmakers that can do certain things. And when you see teams that gel well together and work well together, you can see it, but they'll often talk about it. Having a manager or a coach who makes really, really clear what your job is. You don't have to do everything. You need to do your job. You've got your places to play. And also just going back to the idea of a couple of things we've mentioned so far, Donald, about,
Sure.
when you get really successful salespeople coming in, and then you might say, oh, well, we hired you because you're good, go and do your job. I don't think that happens in team sports either. You hire, there's a guy called Erling Haaland, who's, ripping up the football world over in the UK, in England. at the moment, arguably the most successful striker in the game. I don't believe for 1 second the coach brought him in and just said, right, off you go. You just go and work it out yourself. Of course not. There's a structure, right? There's a plan. There's a plan to the game. They're playing the different shapes and there's different runs that you make at different times. And he's got to work within that system no matter how good he is.
Love it. Love it. So as a sales rep listening to this, it sounds like I need to, one, understand the structure, two, within the parameters where I'm functioning, the team I'm working with, and be able to, two, then adopt that structure and just apply it. And if this is, especially with doing the first part of my, this process, I feel that you shared applies in many different parts of the sales game. This, we talked about, using the phones, but it may be on doing your day-to-day schedule. What's the structure that I need to follow on that, and then adopt that, and then do it consistently and make sure I continue to do that habit, whether it's around closing or whether it's around taking care of my, my mental health. Like I feel that the process and things that you've shared so far apply in many different ways. But the key principle I'm taking away is that I need to be intentional. I need to be deliberate with all that I do as a sales professional.
Yeah.
Is that fair enough? Yeah. Did I put stuff in your mouth on that one?
Absolutely. No, completely that. And it's that angle of, we have this everlasting debate in life about nature versus nurture. And I suspect in my lifetime, maybe even yours, Donald, we might never find that answer definitively. But I think what we can be fairly confident of is that the evidence tells us that nurture plays a significant part. So whether nature does or not, we know that nurture does. And you are more likely to be successful if you work out what are the things that allow me to be successful. And it's hardly ever, whether it's organizing a dinner party or throwing a big event for a friend of yours or going to work each day selling, whatever it might be, you will perform it much better and more consistently and with less stress if you have a plan.
Couldn't agree with you more on that. If folks listening to this episode want to get in touch with you, Paul, they want to learn a little bit more about what you have to offer, maybe you can help them to structure their life and their sales teams or their sales efforts. What is the best way for them to go about getting in contact with you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. So I'm pretty active on there. And they can jump onto our website. Our website is salestalent.uk.com. And all our details there, lots of blogs and links to different training ideas that we share can be found there.
Well, we're going to put that stuff in our show notes. Super appreciative of you taking the time to come on our show today. Thank you so much for your insights. Thanks for your support of the Sales Evangelist podcast. And thanks for helping us to be able to structure our day a little bit more. Appreciate it. Hey, that was Paul Owen. And if you haven't done so already, go ahead and connect with him on LinkedIn. Tell him you heard about him on the Sales Evangelist podcast. And I want you to connect with our sponsors too, because bro, sis, they're giving you some offers, some amazing things that I've talked to them about, and they're trying to hook you up with that can change your game. And it's definitely, these are tools that I use internally, and I know it's changed our sales effort, and I know it can help you out as well. So please go ahead and check that out. Find all the details in the show notes. Connect with Paul, learn about him and some of the cool things that he's doing. And I want to hear from you again. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Donald C. Kelly. You can look me up right now as on LinkedIn. Just go ahead and you can hit the follow button, or you just go ahead and click that connect button and send me a message saying, DK, I listened to the show. It would be an awesome opportunity to chat with you and to connect. As always, I share stuff like this because we want you to improve your game. And if you know somebody that's trying to get into sales, into tech sales, and they want to learn the game, go ahead and send them to our course. Our BDR Academy is taken off, and we have some folks that are trying to break into the world of software sales and tech sales, and career changers. A lot of people right now, to be frank, they're leaving some of these careers that they're not seeing success with, and they're entering into the world of sales. And our team I don't think anybody else is equipped as we are, because we train and consult companies and their sales teams all the time. So we can give you the tools and help those sellers that are coming in know what to do. Check it out. You can find information down in the show notes. It's our TSE BDR Academy. Find more information about that and how we can help you to become one of those evangelizers. As always, thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting our podcast and for telling the world about it. I appreciate you. As always, I want you to be able to build more pipeline, and I want to teach you and help you to be able to close more pipeline, especially going to 2023 more than ever. I want you, most importantly, to raise your level of thinking and go out and do big things. Thanks so much for watching.